Hi everybody, and welcome to another coaster building tutorial. It's been quite some time since we did one of these, and this one comes at the request of the user Erestor95. Today we're going to be looking at a coaster type which can be a little challenging to get right, mainly because it has the potential to fly off the track, the side friction coaster. Now before actually jumping into building a layout, I'm going to discuss some details about this coaster, including some of its typical characteristics and its stat requirements. If you want to go straight to the build tutorial, skip ahead to the timestamp shown below. The side friction coasters in RCT are based off one of the earliest types of roller coaster which didn't have the upstop wheels on the cars to essentially lock them onto the track. This means that things like negative Gs, i.e. airtime, wasn't really a common feature of these types of coasters, as crests had to be taken at pretty low speeds. Some things that make this coaster different to the more conventional types in the game are the fact it can fly off the track, which occurs when you take a crest at speeds above about 50 km an hour. It has relatively light trains, with a max of 3 cars per train in RCT2 and RCT Classic, and only single car trains available in RCT1, which means they lose speed rather quickly. The stats or ratings are generally on the lower side compared to other coaster types, they're one of the cheaper coaster types, and there's no steep slopes available in the vanilla versions of the game. These have been added to OpenRCT2 quite recently, but are only really practical to use on drops, because on a climb, you'll either crash due to being past the speed threshold, or you won't make the hill. Let's now take a look at the stat requirements, which are basically criteria your layout needs to pass for decent excitement, intensity, and nausea ratings. For every one of these you don't hit, your ratings all get divided by 2. Not the end of the world if you miss one, but missing multiple means you might end up with ratings like this. I'll leave a link to a list of stat requirements for all coaster types in RCT in the description below. The minimum drop height requirement, regardless of what units you're using, equates to a drop size of at least 2 shallow drop pieces plus the slope to flat pieces on either side. If you're using metric, it's 4 meters in game. Once you've got at least one of them in your layout, you're good to go. The next requirement is having at least 2 drops on the layout, which is usually quite easy to achieve, and you'll most likely end up having at least 3 times this amount anyway, even on a small layout. The next is having a minimum speed of 18 km an hour, which is fairly self-explanatory, and should actually happen automatically if you meet the minimum drop height requirement explained earlier. The minimum length requirement of 250 meters is also pretty self-explanatory. You can verify all stats have been met after you've tested the ride and look at the Test Data tab. Now let's take a look at the pre-built designs that the game offers by default. There's only a couple to choose from, but they're pretty decent. You've got a simple oval-based layout in Creaky Dips, and a good example of a figure 8 type layout in Roman Races. Both are great to use in scenario play, although Roman Races cuts it a little bit fine to the danger speed of 50 km an hour over these little airtime hills at the end for my liking. I prefer the look of figure 8s myself, and that's what we'll have a go at putting together now. For this tutorial, I'll be using OpenRCT2, but I won't be using any steep slope pieces. So we'll start with the small station platform. I like to raise mine off the ground for realism, but that's up to you. 6 towers should be enough. Now you can use 1, 2 or 3 car trains. Using 3 will generally give you better ratings, but comes with a higher risk of derailing since the trains are heavier and don't lose speed as quickly. For this demo, I'll build the layout for single car trains. Next we'll get straight into our lift hill. Now you really don't need to go tall for these coasters. This will achieve 2 things. 1, it'll help ensure that you stay away from the danger speed of 50 km an hour, and 2, it's more realistic, as these coasters weren't that tall in real life. Once we're at the top, we'll do a pre-drop straight off the lift hill, then into a turnaround. Pre-drops are always a must for me if you don't plan on going straight down after the lift hill. Doing a flat turnaround at the same height as the crest of the lift hill means that the train will take forever to make the first drop, which can hurt your throughput and just looks a little bit boring. After the turnaround, we can get into the next drop. I think you'll find the best method to avoid flying off the track with this coaster type is to have a very gradual overall descent from top to bottom, as opposed to having a huge first drop straight from the top of the lift hill to ground level like you'll find on more modern coaster types. So with that in mind, let's do a small drop to start off with just 1 full shallow piece. And we'll go back up slightly. We'll then go on to a diagonal section. Now diagonal sections definitely aren't crucial, I just think they help make the overall layout look a lot less boxy overall. Now to make sure we hit that minimum drop height requirement, we'll get it out of the way next. So this next drop will have 2 full shallow pieces. As you can see, we're going from 18 meters to 13.5 meters, which will see the minimum drop height requirement met. We'll then go back up a couple meters again, just to make sure we aren't going too fast. We'll then bring this right the way back around. And might add in one more flat diagonal piece just for some variety. Now we're going to do another small drop and climb combo like after the pre-drop near the start, but we'll actually go down again 1 unit after that. My plan now is to build some stacked track sections, which is actually a feature of these sorts of rides back in the day, which I figure were for economic reasons. Leap the Dips is a good example of a side friction coaster that does exactly this. Now, although we're slightly misaligned with the track above, we can actually use an S-bend rather than going back and extending our big turn back here. If anything, this is a good excuse to use another type of track piece, as there's a pretty limited set with the side friction coaster as it is. We'll then match the track above and do a quick up and down moment. And then go into another turnaround directly under the first turn. We can then move out from underneath the lift hill with another S-bend. And then we'll add in another small drop, climb and drop combo. We can then add in a small flat diagonal section to get back under the track. And into our final turnaround. Now for a bit of realism, it's probably a nice idea to add some brakes before the station platform, but definitely not essential. You could also add in a couple extra station platform pieces if you wanted some extra capacity. So that's our layout done. Anyway, to make sure everything works here, we'll give our layout a proper test. While that's testing, I'd like to re-emphasize some key points that I try and stick to when building side friction coasters. I use relatively small lift hills, have a few sections of stack track, and a very gradual descent overall from the highest to the lowest point of the coaster. You can of course do larger drops and climbs on your layout than what I've shown here. I just find that it becomes a bit more challenging to figure out a design that will be safe, and usually results in a lot more reworking of the layout. Some other considerations to keep in mind with this coaster type are: guest weights can have a pretty significant influence on the performance, including the potential to fly off the track, as it will increase the average speed. So this means a train that made it safely during testing can still potentially fly off the track once it's loaded with guests. Block sections aren't available, so you can only run in continuous circuit mode. I'd therefore recommend actually keeping the default 10-second minimum waiting time to help avoid the situation where you've got a full car catching an empty car on the track. So looking at the stats here, we can verify we've satisfied all the stat requirements here, and our ratings are decent enough. For the sake of completeness, here's the same layout alongside with 2 cars per train and 3 cars per train. The stats improve with more trains, but we're cutting it pretty close to the danger speed over some of these crests, so I'd be pretty concerned when guests fill up the trains. With a bit of decorating, we can end up with a coaster that looks something like this. In RCT2 and RCT Classic, you can use the wooden support structures on the side to make the supports look a little bit more realistic, as leaving track in mid-air in the stacked sections here doesn't look that great. That's just about it. Thanks very much for watching and hope you found the video helpful. If there's a particular coaster type you'd like to see a tutorial of, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks again and I look forward to seeing you next time. Cheers.